The summer sun hung like fire above the dust-choked town of Dry Creek. Men gathered by the wooden platform at the edge of the corral, their hats tilted low, shadows hiding the sneers curling at their lips. The sheriff stood uneasy at the edge, arms crossed, watching the spectacle with the kind of silence that said he'd seen this before, and it never ended well. On that platform, chained at the wrists, stood a girl like no other. She towered over the crowd, broad shoulders, long arms, dark hair matted with dust, eyes blazing like a wild stallion that had never been broken. The crowd whispered and spat cruel names. Too wild, too big for a woman, cursed. She was no ordinary orphan up for labor. To them, she was an animal dressed like a girl. The auctioneer barked his pitch, sweating under the heat. No one wanted her. Each time he called for a bid, silence spread. She was a burden, a curse waiting to ruin whichever fool took her home, until one voice broke through the quiet. Eli Carter, the lone rancher, raised his hand. He was a man of 40, broad-backed and sun-scarred, who had built his ranch on stubborn grit and silence. Folks called him the Iron Rancher, for he had neither wife nor kin, just the black soil he worked and the cattle he kept. $3, he said flatly. The crowd roared with laughter. $3 for the wild giant. You'll be ruined, Carter, someone shouted. But Eli didn't flinch. His jaw was set, his eyes locked not on the jeering crowd, but on the girl herself. For a flicker of a moment, her defiance softened, like she recognized something in him, something no one else could see. The auctioneer slammed his gavel. Sold, $3 to Eli Carter. As the chains were unshackled, the girl stepped down. Her eyes swept the faces of the men who mocked her, then settled on Eli. Her voice was low, raw from silence, but steady. You don't know me, she whispered, almost lost beneath the dust. But I know you. Eli froze. The air between them thickened. The sheriff shifted uneasily. What could she mean? The girl straightened her back, towering over him like fate itself, and said clear enough for Eli alone to hear. You're the man I was born to ride beside. The world seemed to stop. Eli's hand tightened around his worn hat. This was no ordinary purchase, and every instinct told him he had just stepped into a story that would not end with peace. If you want to see how Eli's choice changes both their fates, hit that like button and subscribe. This is just the beginning. The chains were struck from her wrist with a clang that echoed through the auction yard. Men shuffled back as though she carried plague, their boots kicking up dry earth. Eli watched her step down from the platform, her shadow stretching longer than any in the crowd. She did not stumble, did not falter. Each stride was measured, like someone born for weight and burden. Yet there was something in the way her eyes scanned every corner, every man, as if memorizing who had called her beast. Eli tipped his hat toward the sheriff. The lawman gave a tight nod, though unease lingered in his eyes. Nobody bought a girl like that. Nobody wanted the trouble. Eli didn't care. He turned for his horse. Mount up, he said, voice low but firm. The girl stared at the animal, a chestnut mare that stamped nervously as she approached. She was taller than the horse itself. For a moment, the crowd expected chaos, that the mare would rear, or she'd refuse, or she'd throw some wild fit. But she moved gentle, slow. Her massive hand brushed the horse's muzzle, and to the shock of onlookers, the mare calmed. No whip, no rope, just a touch. She swung herself up with ease, sitting bareback as if she'd done it her whole life. Whispers rippled through the men. Did you see that? Like the devil's charmed her. Eli ignored them. He mounted his own steed and gave her a look, one that said, follow. The ride back to Dry Creek Ranch stretched 20 miles. The sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rust and fire. Neither spoke much. Eli had no taste for idle talk, and the girl seemed content to study the land with eyes sharp as a hawk's. Finally, he broke the silence. What's your name? She turned her head, dark hair whipping in the wind. They called me Mara, she said. Her voice was rough, like gravel rubbed in the throat, but steady. But that ain't my name, Eli frowned. Then what is it? She hesitated. I'll tell you when I know you're the man to carry it. It wasn't defiance in her tone. It was promise. Eli tightened his grip on the reins. He had no patience for riddles, yet something about her words planted a weight in his chest. As they rode, he studied her form. She sat the horse like she was carved from the same bone and sinew as the land itself. No fear, no hesitation. She didn't ride like a servant, nor like a runaway. She rode like someone meant to command. When night fell, they made camp beneath a lone cottonwood. Eli built the fire with the rhythm of long habit. She sat across from him, watching the sparks climb toward the stars. "You don't ask where I came from," she said suddenly. "I don't need to," Eli replied, eyes fixed on the flames. "A man who buys a wild horse don't ask where the storm bred it. He just decides whether he's strong enough to hold the reins." For the first time, she smiled. A faint, fleeting thing, but enough to unsettle him. "Maybe you are," she murmured. "Maybe that's why I knew your name." Eli's head snapped up. "You said you knew me. How?" She leaned forward, eyes glowing in the firelight. "Because the night I was born, my mother said one thing. You'll never walk alone. Somewhere out there, there's a man who'll ride the same road. He'll carry scars you can't see, but his silence will match yours." The fire popped. For a long moment, Eli didn't breathe. He had never spoken of the loss of his wife, the child buried in unmarked soil, the reason he worked the ranch like a man running from ghosts. But this girl, this so-called wild giant, looked at him as though she had carried those same burdens. Eli swallowed hard, gaze turning to the dark horizon where coyotes howled. He didn't trust fate. He trusted the land, his hands, and his rifle. Yet as the wind shifted, carrying her words into the night, he knew the trail ahead had just twisted into something he could not predict. By the time Eli and Mara reached Dry Creek Ranch, dawn had begun to paint the land in pale gold. The spread was wide, framed by weather-worn fences and hills that rolled like tired shoulders. To Eli, it was a place of labor and silence, where sweat built walls and grief kept them standing. To Mara, it was the first home she had seen that wasn't iron bars or jeering crowds. The ranch hands, a small crew of 3, paused mid-task when they saw her ride in. Their shovels and ropes hung idle. A giant girl towering above their boss was not what they expected. One spat tobacco juice into the dirt, muttering, "Hell, boss, you brought back a circus act?" Eli dismounted, his voice cut sharp. "She's here to work. You'll treat her like anyone else." The men exchanged uneasy looks. None dared speak back. Still, whispers bloomed like weeds the moment his back was turned. Too big, too strange, too dangerous. Mara walked the yard with slow purpose, her eyes taking in every corral, every water trough. She reached out, laying her palm against the flank of a restless stallion that no hand could break. The animal stilled beneath her touch, lowering its head as if recognizing a master. The ranch hands froze, disbelief painted across their faces. "She's witch-marked," one hissed later that night. "Ain't natural." Eli heard them. He ignored it, for now. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Mara worked hard, harder than men twice her size. She hauled hay bales alone, repaired fence posts without complaint, and carried buckets with ease. Sweat beaded on her brow, but her stride never slowed. The ranch hands avoided her, muttering behind her back. One evening, while the sun bled red into the horizon, Eli found her standing by the north pasture, staring at the hills. "You mean to leave?" he asked, his tone half suspicion, half curiosity. She shook her head. "Not yet. The land speaks here. I hear it clearer than anywhere." "What do you hear?" "That storms are coming." Eli frowned. The air was still, not a cloud in sight, but something in her voice clung to him like burrs. That night, Dry Creek's saloon buzzed with gossip. The ranch hands had taken their pay, and their tongues loosened with whiskey. "They say Carter bought himself a freak," one drawled. "Big as a bull, mean as a cougar. Mark my words, she'll turn on him. Giant girl like that? Can't be tamed." The sheriff, seated in the corner, listened with a tight jaw. He didn't like rumors, but he didn't like Eli's gamble either. Trouble had a way of finding those who broke the unspoken order of things. By midnight, whispers had turned to wagers. How long before Carter regretted his $3 bargain? Back at the ranch, Eli sat by the fire with Mara across from him. The flames lit her face in flickers, half shadow, half light. "Why'd you say you were born to ride beside me?" he asked finally, the weight of her words gnawing at him. She looked into the fire. "Because I know what it is to be cast aside, to be too much, too different. And I know you've carried loss, men who bury their grief alone. They burn quiet. But when I saw you in that crowd, I knew. You burn the same way I do." Eli's jaw tightened. He hated the way she cut through him with truth he never offered. "You speak too much for someone who cost $3, he muttered. But even as he said it, he felt the storm she had promised stirring in the distance. Not in the skies, but in the land, in the town, in the way men whispered his name now with doubt. And in the darkness beyond the pasture, two riders sat watching, their silhouettes sharp against the moon. One spat, the other adjusted his rifle. "She's at Carter's ranch," the first man said. "Good," replied the second. "Then the plan moves forward." Morning broke sharp and cold, though the calendars swore it was still summer. Eli was in the barn early, saddling his horse, when the ranch hand named Cole stormed in, red-faced and cursing. "Boss, fences by the South Ridge been cut clean through. Half the cattle scattered to the canyon." Eli cursed under his breath. Fences don't cut themselves. This was sabotage. He grabbed his hat and strode out, barking orders. "You two, round up strays. Cole, with me." Mara stepped forward from the shadows. "I'll go." Cole spat at the ground. "This ain't work for some freakish girl. Stay put." Her eyes narrowed, but Eli raised a hand. "She comes." His tone left no argument. The ride to the South Ridge was rough, dust biting at their throats. The broken fence gaped open like a wound, splintered wood hanging loose. Fresh hoofprints told the story plain. Driven cattle, forced east. "Rustlers," Eli muttered. Cole swore again. "That's the Danner gang's doing, I'll bet. Been stealing stock for months. Sheriff too blind to stop them." Mara dismounted without a word, crouching low to the prints. Her fingers brushed the dirt, reading it like scripture. "Two riders," she said. "One heavy, one lighter. Drove them hard toward the canyon. They'll camp by water." Cole stared. "How in hell would you know that?" She looked up, eyes steady. "Because it's what I do." Eli studied her for a long moment. She was no ordinary girl. She read the land like a tracker born in the dust. They followed the trail into the canyon. Sure enough, by midday, they found smoke curling up from a hidden grove. Voices carried on the wind. Men laughing, bragging over stolen cattle. Eli held up a hand. "Stay back." But Mara stepped forward. "They'll hear you coming. Let me." Before Eli could stop her, she strode down the slope like a storm. The rustlers, two men, guns at their hips, spun in shock. "Well, look what we got here," one sneered. "A giant wench come to fetch her cows." The other laughed, reaching for his revolver. Mara didn't wait. She grabbed a length of fallen branch, thick as a man's arm, and swung it with terrifying speed. The gun went flying, the man howling as he crumpled to the dirt. The second rustler drew too slow. Mara's boot caught him square in the chest, sending him sprawling. Eli and Cole thundered down just as the dust settled. The rustlers groaned, disarmed and broken. Cole stared, jaw slack. Sweet Christ. Eli swung off his horse, rifle still in hand, eyes locked on Mara. She stood tall, breath steady, not a hint of fear in her face. "You're reckless," Eli said, though his voice carried something more complicated. Half reprimand, half reluctant awe. "They'd have shot you on sight," she answered simply. "Better they fear me than you." They drove the cattle back by dusk. The ranch hands whispered when they saw who had done the work, their gazes caught between fear and respect. Word would spread quick, about the giant girl who fought like a man. That night, Eli sat on the porch, staring out across the dark fields. Mara joined him, silent for a long while. Finally, she spoke. "You'll have more of this," she said. "The Danner gang won't stop. And the town, those whispers, they'll sharpen. You took me in, Carter, but now you carry my curse." Eli glanced at her, the lantern light flickering across his weathered face. "I don't believe in curses, just choices." She looked away, voice low. "Then you've already made the one that binds us both." Far off, thunder cracked across a cloudless sky. The storm she had promised was no longer just talk. It was here, and it was moving fast. The storm didn't come with rain, it came with whispers. By the week's end, every corner of Dry Creek town buzzed with tales of Carter's giant girl. At the saloon, the story grew with every shot of whiskey. Some said she'd knocked a rustler 10 feet into the air with one swing. Others swore she carried the devil's mark, that she'd hexed Carter's cattle so they followed her like lambs. When Eli rode in for supplies, conversations died as soon as his boots hit the wooden floor. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. He felt the weight of their judgment pressing like a noose. Sheriff Boone met him outside the general store, jaw set tight. Boone was a man of quiet authority, but even his voice carried unease. "Eli, word is you let that girl loose on rustlers. Folks say she near killed him." They drew first, Eli answered flatly. Doesn't matter. This town don't like what it can't control. The sheriff leaned in, lowering his tone. Men are scared. Scared men make dangerous choices. Keep her close, or better yet, send her away. Eli's hand tightened on the sack of flour he carried. She stays. The sheriff studied him for a moment, then sighed. You've always been a stubborn fool. Just don't let it cost you your land, or your life. Back at the ranch, Mara sensed the shift. The ranch hands avoided her more than ever, speaking only when forced. At night, she'd sit by the corral, staring at the stars, silent as stone. One evening, Eli joined her. The cattle shifted restlessly, sensing the tension in the air. They want me gone, don't they? She said without turning. Eli hesitated. They don't understand you, that's all. She gave a bitter laugh, low and short. Men don't fear what they don't understand. They destroy it. For a long while, neither spoke. Then she looked at him, her gaze steady, piercing. Do you believe them? Do you believe I'm cursed? Eli met her eyes, saw the weight she carried. The years of being branded monster, freak, wild. He shook his head slowly. I believe you're strong, and strength always scares the weak. Something softened in her face, a crack in the armor she wore. You're the first man who ever said that. But shadows lengthened. That very night, 2 masked riders crept close to the ranch. They left a message carved into the barn door. Send her away or bleed. Eli found it at dawn. His jaw set like iron, but he said nothing to the hands. No need to fan their fear. Still, the truth was clear. The Danner gang, or worse, had marked them both. Later, Mara spotted him sharpening his rifle by lamplight. You think you can fight them all? She asked. Eli looked up, the firelight catching the scar along his jaw. I don't plan on dying easy. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. Then you'll need me. Whether this town wants it or not, Carter, you're not riding this trail alone. Her words lingered, heavy with something deeper than defiance. They sounded like an oath, spoken not just to him, but to the land itself. And out beyond the ranch fence, unseen in the rising heat, the riders gathered, more than 2 this time. Watching, waiting. The storm Mara promised was closing in, and Dry Creek Ranch stood square in its path. The sun had barely risen when the gunshots came. Not close, distant, muffled, but enough to stir the cattle into a frenzy. Eli was already saddled by the time Cole burst into the yard, pale and shaking. Boss, riders at the north fence. Danner's men, I swear it. They've spooked the herd. Eli's face hardened. Get the others, arm up. But when he looked, only 2 of the 3 ranch hands came running. The third, Jed, was nowhere to be seen. His bunk lay empty, bedroll gone. A cold knot tightened in Eli's chest. Damn it, he muttered. We've been sold out. The North Ridge was chaos. Dust rolled like storm clouds as cattle scattered, horns and hooves thrashing. Mara rode at Eli's side, towering above the frightened herd. Bullets whined past, pinging off fence posts. There, Eli shouted, spotting 3 masked riders driving the herd. Before he could fire, Mara spurred her horse forward. She rode like fury itself, closing the gap in seconds. The rustlers turned their guns on her, but she was faster, grabbing one by the collar and hurling him clean off his saddle. He hit the dirt with a sickening thud. Another raised his revolver. Eli fired first, the shot cracking sharp in the morning air. The rider toppled. The last man wheeled his horse and fled, dust trailing behind. But the cattle, half the herd was already gone, driven into the canyon. Eli cursed, spurring forward, but Mara cut him off. Not worth dying for, she said. They want you chasing. It's a trap. Her words rang too true. Eli ground his teeth but pulled back. We'll get them another day. Back at the ranch, tempers flared. The men muttered openly now, no longer whispers. This is madness, one spat. She's brought nothing but blood and trouble. Cole nodded, eyes darting nervously. Boss, maybe the sheriff was right. Send her off, before the Danners burn us out. Mara stood silent, her face unreadable, but her hands balled into fists at her sides. Eli's voice cut sharp as steel. She stays! The men stiffened. None dared argue further, but their resentment curdled in the air like rot. That night, Eli sat on the porch, rifle across his knees. Mara joined him, silent for a long while. Finally, she spoke. They'll turn on you, Carter. Men don't follow a leader they think is cursed. Eli glanced at her, eyes hard. Then let them leave. I didn't build this ranch on their backs. Her gaze lingered on him. In the lantern light, there was something fierce and steady in her expression, something that unsettled him more than gunfire ever could. "You're not alone in this fight," she said. "Not anymore." But even as she spoke, trouble was already inside the gate. Jed, the missing hand, rode into town that very night, slipping into the saloon with dust on his boots and lies on his tongue. "Carter's lost his mind," he told the men gathered there. "Harboring a beast of a girl. She's dangerous. Saw her kill with my own eyes. Ranch ain't safe no more. Best we take matters into our own hands." The crowd listened, their fear fanned into fury. By the time whiskey loosened their courage, plans had already taken root. By dawn, Eli's enemies would no longer be just the Danner gang. They would be his neighbors. The knock came before sunrise, hard, angry fists pounding the wooden door. Eli rose from his chair, rifle already in hand. Mara stood behind him, tall and silent, her shadow stretching across the room like a warning. When he opened the door, Sheriff Boone stood there, hat low, face lined with sleepless worry. Behind him, a dozen townsfolk clustered in the half-light, lanterns burning like angry stars. Some carried shotguns, others pitchforks. And at their head, jaw clenched tight, stood Jed. Boone's voice was heavy. "Eli, you need to hand the girl over." The crowd murmured agreement, voices rising like restless cattle. "She's cursed. She'll bring the Danners down on all of us. She ain't natural." Mara stepped into the doorway, her frame filling it, her eyes cold as steel. The crowd fell into uneasy silence. For a moment, no one dared move. Jed found his voice. "You saw her, Sheriff. She near killed men with her bare hands." "What kind of woman does that?" Boone shifted, discomfort in his eyes. "What kind of woman, maybe? But the law don't answer to curses, Jed. Still," he turned to Eli, "this town's scared, and scared men don't wait long before they turn violent. Best way to keep peace is to let her go." Eli's voice cut low, steady. "She stays. She's done nothing but protect what's mine." Jed sneered. "Protect? She's ruined you already. Half your herd's gone, and next they'll burn your house." The townsfolk stirred, voices rising. A woman clutched her shawl tighter, whispering prayers. A man spat in the dirt, muttering, "Devil's spawn!" Mara's voice rang out, calm but sharp as a blade. "You think I brought the storm, but the storm was already here. You just needed someone to blame." The crowd bristled. Boone raised a hand, trying to steady the heat. "That's enough talk. Eli, listen to me. If you don't bend, this'll break into blood." Eli looked at Boone, then at Mara. His hand tightened on the rifle. He'd spent years keeping his ranch alive, brick by brick, fence by fence. Now all of it balanced on this choice. Slowly he stepped forward, his voice carrying across the yard. "You call her cursed, I call her mine. This ranch was built with my hands, and I'll be damned before I let any man tell me who I can or can't keep here. You want her gone? You'll have to go through me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shifted back, uncertain. Others gripped their weapons tighter. Jed snarled, spitting. "So be it." Boone's face darkened. "Don't be a fool, Eli." But it was too late. The line had been drawn. The first bottle shattered against the fence. Then came the torches, waving like fiery claws in the dim light. The mob roared, voices breaking into chaos. Eli raised his rifle, steady as stone. Mara stepped beside him, taller than any flame, her presence alone enough to still some hearts. "Stand down," Boone shouted, but his words drowned in the roar of fear and fury. And in the distance, beyond the fields, another sound rose, the thunder of hooves. The Danner gang, drawn by the chaos, were coming like vultures to a carcass. The ranch now stood at the edge of war, neighbors at the front, outlaws at the back, and only Eli and Mara between them. The mob surged at the fence line, torches crackling, the smell of kerosene thick in the air. Sheriff Boone shouted for order, but his voice was swallowed by the storm of fear. Jed stood at the front, his face twisted with triumph, whipcord thin in the firelight. "You had your chance, Carter," he roared. "Tonight we end this. Her and you with her if you stand in the way." Eli stood tall, rifle raised, his jaw like iron. Beside him, Mara loomed in the doorway of the ranch house, her shadow stretching across the yard. The fire painted her eyes gold, her presence both terrifying and unyielding. For a heartbeat, the crowd faltered. Then came the sound, hooves heavy and fast. Outlaws poured over the ridge, the Danner gang riding hard, rifles flashing in the night. Bullets cracked, torches flew, and suddenly the mob's fury turned to panic. "They're here!" someone screamed. Chaos erupted. Townsfolk scattered, some firing wildly, others fleeing as the Danners thundered into the yard. Jed shouted for them to stand their ground, but his voice was drowned in the thunder of guns. Eli took a shot clean, dropping a rider before he reached the corral. Mara charged forward, wielding nothing but the broken fence post she'd torn free. She swung like a tempest, unhorsing one outlaw with bone-shattering force, then turned to shield Eli from another's bullet. Boone drew his revolver, firing into the melee. He'd come to keep the peace, but now found himself fighting shoulder to shoulder with the very man he'd warned. "Damn you, Carter!" he shouted between shots. "You drag me into hell every time. Then quit complaining and shoot straighter," Eli barked back. The yard became a war. Smoke, fire, and dust swirled as friends and foes blurred in the chaos. A townsman's torch ignited the barn roof, flames licking skyward. Cattle bellowed, breaking fences, stampeding through the fight. Mara moved through it all like a force of nature. Where bullets missed, her strength did not. She hurled one outlaw across a water trough, ripped another from his saddle, her roar echoing above the gunfire. The men who had called her curse now watched in stunned silence. She was not demon nor beast, but their shield. Eli fought with grit, every shot measured, every step guarding the line between ranch and ruin. But the numbers pressed hard. For every man that fell, another seemed to rise. Jed seized the moment, snatching a fallen pistol and aiming straight for Eli's back. Boone saw it. He fired first. The shot rang clean. Jed crumpled to the dirt. His treachery ended in silence. Boone spat, muttering, "Never could stomach a coward." By midnight, the Danners broke. Those who survived fled into the hills, leaving their dead behind. The townsfolk, shaken and ash-faced, dropped their weapons, too stunned to speak. Mara stood at the center of it all, chest heaving, her clothes torn and streaked with blood and soot. Eli limped to her side, his hat gone, rifle nearly spent. They stood together, backlit by the burning barn, the image seared into every eye that remained. Boone lowered his smoking revolver. "You see?" he barked at the crowd. "She's no curse. Without her, we'd all be meat for the Danners tonight." No one argued. The silence was thick with shame, fear, and something else. Respect. Eli turned to Mara. In her eyes, he saw the truth that had haunted him since the auction block. She wasn't born to be bought, nor bound, nor feared. She was born to ride beside him. And now the whole town knew it. The ranch smelled of smoke for days. Black scars ran across the barn timbers, and the earth still held the stains of blood where men had fallen. The cattle roamed restless, spooked by fire and gunfire alike. Eli spent every dawn patching fences, hammer in one hand, rifle never far from the other. Mara worked beside him without pause. Her strength rebuilt what the flames had taken, her hands lifting beams no man could carry alone. The ranch hands, once wary, now followed her word without question. They had seen what she did the night the Danners came. Respect had replaced their fear, but only within the fences of Dry Creek Ranch. In town, things shifted more slowly. Some whispered shame at having raised torches against their own. Others muttered that Carter's ranch was cursed ground, that the blood spilled there had stained it forever. Boone tried to steady the talk, but even he knew the line between fear and gratitude is thin, and fear often wins. One afternoon, Eli rode into Dry Creek for nails and feed. The saloon doors creaked open as he passed, eyes following him. This time there was no jeering, no open challenge, just silence. The kind that pressed down heavy like a storm cloud refusing to break. At the general store, Mrs. Whitlow, a sharp-eyed widow, finally spoke. "Carter," she said, voice low but steady, "that girl of yours, and she saved this town, whether folks admit it or not. Don't let them shame you for it." Eli tipped his hat. "She's not mine," he said quietly, "but she chose to stand with me. That's more than I ever asked." Back at the ranch, Mara felt the shift in the air as surely as she felt the wind on her skin. One night, she sat by the corral, watching stars tremble in the dark sky. Eli joined her, lowering himself onto the rail. "They'll never forget what happened here," she said without looking at him. "Good," Eli replied. "Let them remember who kept them alive." She turned, eyes catching his in the starlight. "That's not what they'll remember. They'll remember their fear. Fear don't vanish. It waits. It festers. Eli was silent. He knew she was right. The sheriff came at dawn 2 days later, dust thick on his coat. He brought news no one wanted. "Danner's gang ain't finished," Boone said grimly. "Word is, their kin from across the border are riding this way. Twice the number. They want vengeance. For blood spilled here." Eli's jaw clenched. "Let them come." Boone shook his head. "This ain't just rustlers anymore, Carter. This is a war. And you can't fight it with 3 hands. A girl in a burned barn." Mara stepped forward, her presence casting a long shadow in the morning sun. "Then we don't fight it alone," she said. "If this town wants to live, they'll have to stand. Just like we did." Boone looked at her, the girl once called cursed, and saw in her eyes the kind of fire that could forge a legend. "Maybe," he muttered, "but legends are born in blood." That night, Eli sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Mara sat opposite, the crackle of wood between them. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Eli broke the silence. "You said you'd tell me your true name when I proved worthy to carry it. You think I've done that yet?" Her eyes softened, the first trace of warmth since the day he bought her. "My name is Althea," she whispered. "It means healer. Funny, isn't it? A girl who only ever brought fear." Eli's throat tightened. He lifted his glass, voice low. "Then let's see if Dry Creek can heal too. One way or another." Beyond the dark horizon, the thunder of hooves began again, faint but growing. The storm was not over. It was only gathering strength. The night before the storm broke, Dry Creek slept uneasy. Men who once spat Eli Carter's name now sharpened knives, patched rifles, and looked toward his ranch with a mix of shame and resolve. The sheriff had called a meeting in the square, and though half the town stayed home in fear, enough came to fight. "We don't get to choose our battles," Boone told them, his voice carrying over the crackle of torches. "The Danners are coming, twice as many as before. If we don't stand, we'll lose not just Carter's land, but every acre around it. So swallow your fear. Tomorrow we fight." At dawn, the horizon darkened with riders. Dust rose like smoke as the Danners thundered in, faces hidden by scarves, rifles gleaming. The ground shook under the weight of their charge. Eli stood at the ranch gate, rifle in hand. Althea, stood beside him, tall as the cottonwoods, unflinching. For the first time, the townsfolk stood at their back, weapons ready. Jed's empty bunk haunted the ranch, but no one spoke his name. Boone barked orders, placing men along the fence line. The cattle were driven into the canyon for safety. Then silence fell, broken only by the creak of saddles and the distant thunder of hooves. The clash was like lightning meeting dry brush. Gunfire split the morning, men shouting, horses screaming. The Danners hit the fence hard and wood splintered under the impact. Eli fired steady, each shot deliberate, cutting riders down before they reached the yard. Althea charged where the line faltered, wielding a wagon axle like a club. She broke through the gang's ranks, scattering men who'd never thought fear could wear a woman's face. Her roar echoed across the fields, louder than gunpowder, fiercer than any curse ever spoken about her. The townsfolk, emboldened by her fury, held their ground. Some fell, but none fled. Even Boone, hat shot clean from his head, fought like a man possessed, shouting, "For Dry Creek!" In the thick of it, Eli saw the leader of the Danners, a scarred brute on a black stallion, rifle raised. Time slowed. The outlaw's sights locked on him. Before Eli could move, Althea was there. She shoved him aside, the bullet meant for his heart tearing across her shoulder. Blood blossomed bright against her shirt. She stumbled but did not fall. With a cry that shook the canyon, she swung the axle, tearing the leader from his horse. The brute hit the dirt, groaning, before Eli's rifle ended it clean. The sight broke the gang. One by one, they turned tail, galloping into the hills, leaving their dead behind. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of fire and the groans of the wounded. The battle was over. Dry Creek still stood. Eli dropped his rifle, rushing to Althea. She knelt in the dust, blood staining her arm, but her eyes steady, fierce as ever. "You're a damn fool," he growled, voice rough. She smiled faintly. "Born to ride beside you, remember, even if it means taking a bullet meant for you." He pulled her close, the weight of what she'd said sinking deep. Around them, the townsfolk gathered, their faces no longer twisted with fear. They looked at her with something new, respect, even reverence. Boone stepped forward, hat in hand. "Dry Creek owes its life to her. Anyone still calls her cursed will answer to me." The crowd murmured agreement. No one argued. That night, under the same stars that once heard only whispers of curses, the ranch was quiet. The air still smelled of gunpowder, but hope stirred with it. Eli sat on the porch, shoulder brushing against Althea's as they watched the horizon. "You could leave now," he said softly. "After what you've done, no chain, no word can bind you here." She shook her head, eyes fixed on the endless land. "I was never bound. I chose, and I'll keep choosing." Eli turned to her, the weight of years of silence breaking at last. "Then you're not just beside me, you're with me." For the first time, she let herself smile without guard. "And that's where I was born to be." The wind carried her words into the night, settling over Dry Creek like an oath carved into stone. The legend of the wild giant girl ended that night, and the story of Althea, who rode beside the lone rancher, had only just begun.